Iadlock. You're successful.
Okay.
Or you made it. Iadlock. If you want to say I made it, you'd probably say Yachwadlock.
Yachwadlock.
Yachwadlock. If you want to say I am making it, Ayachwadlock. 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 Probably heard a sound in there that's not English. It's like you're clearing your throat. That's spelled with an underlined X. So that's another important sound in the Tlingit language. Yachwadlock. You might think I'm exaggerating it, but if you ever heard Nora Downhour talk, she speaks and pronounces that sound extremely clearly. You can really see it. Or hear it, excuse me. A lot of times you have to really struggle to hear if a speaker is saying or, and that sound is in other languages, and in Hebrew it's somewhere between and it's more like, I can't do it, but there's variations on that sound. You have to go as far back in your throat as you can reach with the back of your tongue. One way to practice is to take a little drink of water, which I don't have. Everybody should have a little cup of water or something to drink as you're, taya, neshka kuge, yeah. So gargle with water in your mouth. Go as far back as you can. Put your back of your tongue on the back of your throat. Then maybe you're in the right place. So there's many hard sounds in Tlingit. There are 50 letters that are used as an orthography to write every sound. So in a sense, the Tlingit language is a phonetic written language. However, it's been modified in the last 20 years to be standardized. And there's a couple of little pitfalls in those standardized letters, but I wouldn't bother to talk about it to beginning students because you have so much to learn. You can do that later. I have a video I'd like to show. And this is a video of one of my middle school classes. There is, while I'm finding it, oh, I'm going to make sure I can share first. Oh, I'm sharing. Okay. Okay, do I have it pulled up already? Okay. If I do this, I have to share sound as well. Okay, sharing sound. Okay, I'm just going to do my whole screen because I don't see the actual document. Okay, this is a video clip. Okay, come on. Hold on. Okay. And we're looking for one more. There it is. Okay. I hope this works. Okay, so can someone unmute yourself and tell me if you can hear it? Okay, let me tell you what's coming up. This is my messy Tlingit language classroom in middle school. You can see there's a student putting drawings on the wall, and there's 2 or 3 tables of students practicing a dialogue. This exercise is called WAYK. Write that down, WAYK. It's also called Language Hunters Dialogue. You may want to research these 2 on YouTube or on the internet. This is a technique for learning whole sentences and answers, and it has a lot of repetition. The second time around, you'll hear this young man right here is giving the negative. In the Tlingit language, the negative changes the verb. And so you almost need to know how to say the negative form of a verb. So we include it in our 3-part exercises. Let's just watch and I'll be quiet.
Dasaya. Kuka akya.
So now when you start saying
Kuhida akya.
Kuhida aya. Kuka aya.
Dasaya.
Hashakasha aya.
Hashakasha akya.
Hashakasha aya.
Tauwe akya. Dasaya.
Kuhida aya.
Kuhida akya.
Kuhida aya.
Kas akya. Dasaya. Tau akya. Kas akya. Dasaya. Kas akya. Gao akya. Dasaya. Au akya. Dana akya. Dasaya. Dana akya. Guka akya. Iku haa iku.
Okay, so this is actually the dad of one of the students that came in. They wanted to learn, he wanted to be part of the exercise and practice, conversation practice. Leanne Hinton is another one I wanted to throw out there. If you haven't seen her book, Leanne Hinton, she put out a book called When Teacher Isn't Fluent. I think it's called that, When Teacher Isn't Fluent. It's got like 8 or 9 chapters, but I like the first 2 chapters. She gives ideas on how to learn your language, your heritage language, by yourself. She's thought of lots of ways and she mentions people who have done it. And so I'd say read chapter 2 especially, and you'll be very highly encouraged to go ahead and try. It's much better if you can find a language partner, somebody you can practice with. Hopefully you can practice every day. But if you can't, you can practice in your own head. And she says, go ahead, speak your language at the grocery store or wherever. And then if you feel you need to, translate for yourself. It's the practice. If you don't have a practice partner, then go as far as you can. I believe they have an amazing group of self-starters in the Yukon, and I'm so excited and proud for Chitwu and his cohort that have been working together. And I'm so proud of you guys. Okay, so
Sheesh.
yechayati. That's the way it is. So you also may have noticed in the video that the students were using a form of sign language. I don't use sign language myself very well, but I forced my cohorts here in Sitka, and I forced ourselves to incorporate sign language into this exercise. It takes your negative mind off of what you're saying. So it's really hard to put language and hand motion together. But when you start trying to do language and hand motions together, it kind of takes your mind off of the speaking part, and you're concentrating on the sign language, and then the speaking part just comes out. Also, sign language helps you to remember, how do you say this chunk? So this would be the sign language for ganashish. So you could go like this and say it 10 times, maybe 20 times, ganashish, and it will be in two parts of your brain. It'll be in your speech center and in your body motion or movement center. And if you go like this, the word will pop into your memory. Oh yeah, ganashish. Ganashish. Yeah. So practice saying ganashish with the hand motion. And it doesn't even have to be this, just any hand motion or body movement that you make for what you're trying to remember. You can have your own system. And it's nice if you're using real sign language, because then you're learning two languages at once. So, but the reason you do it is so that you have that word or that sentence or that conversation in two parts of your brain. So if you just can't get the left side of your brain to shoot over the words to say, do the hand motion, which is in the correct side of the other side of the brain, and it sucks the synapse ties that you've built up. Make it like, oh, the word just pops out of your mouth like magic. And it really is feels like magic. Yiku ayach kwan. You guys be strong. Yiku ayach kwan. Be brave. Kanai aku. Try. Just try. Kanai aku. Okay, so let me stop sharing for a second and ask if there's any questions. I do have another video to share, although that took up only 15 minutes. Suggestions, or has anybody heard about this technique?
Well, I was actually Where Are Your Keys intern when Evans actually started it back in 2000, and I think I was in my junior year of undergrad, so a long time ago, over a decade ago now. And I was able to become conversational in Chinookwawaa in under a year without practice. I love Where Are Your Keys? I still know most of the ASL. I was also conversational in ASL at that time. And I was actually talking with sorry, you know I'm going to learn it, about trying to set up using GatherTown to do a Where Are Your Keys exercise using a virtual space to do that. I'm a huge proponent of Where Are Your Keys? It's so much fun. We used to call it playing with language. So we'd say we were hunting, but we would also say we were playing. It's my favorite way to learn a language.
So cool. Has anybody else tried it? Well, go ahead, Leah.
Oh, I've seen people use this kind of motion technique to embed grammar for people who have trouble with those things. With people who find it difficult to just sit and learn, do better when they have some kind of action to be involved in. But also, there's this kinesthetic relationship between the word and an action that is reinforcing. So that's the space I've seen it in.
Another whole thing about where are your keys is that the whole thing, you're not supposed to use English at all, but we know we get tired and we get full and our brains get too much. And so you actually should, one of the ways I did is standing in a circle with multiple rings or circles. So when you got too full, you stepped back so you could digest a little bit, but still hear and not bring the English to the forefront. And then when you were ready to come play again, you would walk forward into the inner circle and go back and forth on how full you were or not full. And so I also was a huge proponent. I was his unpaid intern for almost 2 years. I'm very, very fond of it.
Oh, me too. So it's really hard to put the two together and you have to be committed and work really hard at it. But and the newer you are at this technique, the faster you get full. If you noticed on this exercise video, that last round, they were starting to get full. It took him a minute to remember. Oh, and then he'd remember. He probably was ready to step back and listen for a minute and just let your anxiety level reduce before you jump back in again. It's pretty cool. The history of this technique is that some college students wanted to learn a language, learn how to learn languages, and they were traveling around the world, and so they started practicing this with languages as they traveled around the world. And I'm probably butchering the history of it, but the interesting part is the theory is that all you need to know is how to say, how do you say? How do you say this? Or what is this? Da saya. And so if you learn how to say what is this in a language with a fluent person, you can just practice, practice, practice until the fluent person is just sick of playing, and you can learn nouns, nouns, nouns. And then the fluent person cannot help it. They'll start putting nouns in sentences, and then you're going to start learning sentences. So, and it worked for a lot of people. They just went around the world riding on a bus, sitting by somebody and saying, da saya, in the language of that speaker. It's pretty cool history, the roots of this exercise. So any other questions? Okay. Comments or anything? I'm trying to find the next video clip I wanted to play. Yesterday I shared, oops, I'm in the wrong place. Yesterday I shared, I shared a website. Did anybody save that? You want to put it on the chat box for me? Trying to remember where I had it. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and play. I can't find where oh yeah, I remember where this is gonna take me 5 minutes to find it, so I didn't pull it up ahead of time. So I'm gonna give you Unit 1 document. I'm gonna put it in the chat box unless somebody else got it.
Are you looking for the Susie and Johnny?
Susie and Jimmy, did somebody put that in the chat box, the same link from yesterday?
Yeah, we got a couple people who got you.
Okay, okay, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to open my copy of Unit 1, which is in a different place. I forgot where I put it so I could find it. I'm going to open that up, and then I'm going to play. So if all of you would pull up the Unit 1 and put it off to the side, I'm going to share my screen for the video, and then you can follow along reading as you hear the conversation. This is a puppet show, and there we go. The puppet show is, now I gotta play it. Oh, okay, where are you? looking for the movie. Here it is. Okay. Okay, now I have to share screen and open up the. Okay, where did you go? Come on, share screen. Ugh, here it is. Okay, there's the video. Here we go. Oh. Here we go. No, wrong one. Hang on. If you'll follow it, I'll find it. Do. Is it? Ugh. No. Sorry. Oh, I pulled up the audio. Hang on. I want you to see the video. This is a puppet show that was made in 1969. That was so far ahead of their time. It's just amazing. Okay, where is the video? Here it is. I found it. MP4. Can you guys see this? Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead. Unit 1. Pull your written part over. You can read while you listen. Oops, sorry.
Wasaiati.
Dasa.
Wasaiati.
Wasaiati.
Susie Yekatuasab. Wasai Duasab.
Jimmy Yekatuasab.
Wasaiati Jimmy.
Kash wasa Susie.
Oh, Jimmy. Jimmy, Kayade Shakishan.
Tisawa. Aho, Wasaiati Yatke. Jimmy Yekatuasab.
Khatkua Awa Susie Yekatuasab. Wasai Duasab.
Wasai Duasab.
Wasaiati. Shad Kaya Khat.
Ka Koyakhat.
Oh, Jimmy, Stakataya Wushun Rehatiti.
Wasaiati Ahonhe. Wasaiati.
Plus Wasa. Tletwasa.
Jimmy ye Hatuasak.
Achet Yisach at Yatki. Susie ye Hatuasak.
Ka Koyahat.
Kak Ayachat.
Hatawakak Sose.
Hatkua Awe. Ahu. Shat Ayachat.
Wushun ke Hatsiti.
Ayacha Kwe at Yatki. Tute ye Yigachtisiti. Kayade Uniski Jimmy. Kayade Shakishan.
Tsutsaye Gachfisatin Ahunke.
Tuteye Yigachtisatin Ahunki.
Yeah. Shakishan. 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 Kayade Shakishan. Wave to the people. Kayade Shakishan. Shakishan. Yeah. So that's Unit 1. It does get more challenging. Since we have a little time, I'd like to pull up Unit 9. You'll see it's even more challenging. It's still not that long. It's a little longer than this one, but it's still challenging. Okay, where is it? Oh, tons in the chats. Let me look at that real first. Oh yeah, it's from 1969. Nobody had done anything like this before. Oh, good. Thank you guys for pulling it out. Okay. Yeah, so this was, I was working with the Sitka Native Education program in 1978, and they had one of these giant boxes. It was like 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. And the video, the cassette was not this big. It was like almost as big as the box. And that was a 5-minute video. And it was huge. And I don't know what happened to that player or the set of videos, but I was so happy when I saw somebody had digitized the whole set. So, and it wasn't a regular reel-to-reel. It was the one right after reel-to-reel. They started learning how to put a reel-to-reel into a cassette, and that was the first one. It was just gigantic. Okay. Somebody asked a question. I read about giving a command and worked up to asking someone, what did she do? Okay, and is there a question there? Let me pull it down. Oh, maybe this is TPR. Total. Yeah. Well, when you're using commands for language learning, they don't have to say anything. They just understand and react. If I said, Keish gain, that means jump. If I said, Tlek dehin, Keish gain, jump 1 time. They don't have to say anything. So you tune up your ears first before you have to reply with an answer. The question, Dasaye adane. Oh, that's what is she doing? Oh no, maybe I don't know how to say what did she do. Oh, I'll have to learn that one myself. Okay, let's do the next to the last one. The last one I didn't finish digitizing. Oh, question on Neishka.
I have a question about the Word document. Why are some parts highlighted and why are some parts not highlighted?
So that you can tell who's talking without, you don't watch the video, you don't know who's talking. So, but if you're watching the video and the highlighted ones, you can see, oh, that's a change of speaker. That's another change of speaker. So I put the highlight in there so you could tell. I could have said S for Susie and J for Jimmy, but I figured for my middle school students, they'd probably appreciate to have a highlight. And when they see a yellow box, they know it's their turn. and it seemed to work out better for them. Achawe. That's why. Achawe. Let me try. Okay, I'm looking for number 10. You guys find the document for number 10. I'm gonna look for the video. It looks like I don't need to read it myself. I just have to find the file. This one.
Gushuk.
Gushuk, gushuku gushuku the ninth one. Gushuku Huate, I found it. I'm gonna play the video, the MP4, not 3. Gusu, where is it? MP3, and I gotta wave. Yeah. Do, where is the, found it, Huate. I found it, Huate. Okay, now I'm gonna play it, and then I'm gonna turn on, oh, that doesn't work. First, I have to find there. I have to turn on the share screen. Okay, share sound. Okay, give me a heads up if you can hear it. Oops, is it going? Yeah, it's going, maybe. Got it? Okay.
You would go a jiggy kina at. Wasiyati stakati Juan.
Wasiyati stakati Juan. Keswasa. Yake stakat keswasa hasuti ya yigi. De agawu aya hede shunach tutani we kook Jimmy.
Hakuk suse. Kewushten stakati Juan.
Keek, deeg, natsk. Jimmy,
Suse. Wasa. Kansusi. Kinaat ayasu kinaat.
So it says Tsu, which is greenish blue or bluish green, but I think that the digitization washed out some of the color.
su kinaat. Su ayikdach tu skein we kook.
Keshutasa. Kinaat klenaya.
Kinaat klein aya. Khatin aqaltut Jimmy.
Gusso. Yat.
We aqaltut aqaltu skein. Jimmy jaade ye khatna'u.
Jadiya khatna'u. Wa'ati spensusi.
Yadu qan suqwena. Yadu tlaat suqwena. Yadu qesh suqwena. Qadlet suqwena. Qazu suqwena. Qatuj suqwena. Tlakhwasa yake.
Susi kan.
Jimmy, ayakh yadu stooch. Kleig, deeg, nask, dagun, kejin, kleidusho. Jimmy ashkanastuthiat. Wasa kaududlizak natski a.
Qeshq naskiha. Awa qeshq. Ayakh akwa atyathe. Qeshq.
Wasa kaududlizak tleg sitiyi a.
Wasa kaududlizak tleg siti atyathe. How tlewushten tleg siti a. Qanyakhyati.
Yike. Wasa kaududlizak tledushuch sitiyi a atyatki.
Tledu shoxiti a tujach kaududlizak. Wasa kaududlizak kejin siti a atyathe. So.
Atakashqin. Kejin sitiyi as uyach kaududlizak ayacha kwa atyatki.
Qatagun siti a tletyach yakhyati. Tlakauden atyathe. Tagun siti a tletyach yati yake.
Qadekh sitiyi a qa'a. Wasa yete Jimmy. Tuj. Su. Tlet. Qesh. Qa. Khatire shi atyatki. Kunalchish. Tlat yakhyati.
Qat susi tsuwe kinaat qaltudi ilqan.
Yeqote. Qan. Qan luqwena aya atu. Qatlat luqwena.
Ats akhat yatke ushtin ya kahtu sai. Ya yuqatan hakuk fresh luqwena. Dalakauden. Late luqwena. Lakauden. Su luqwena. Qatuj luqwena.
Akhtuwasigu ya qan luqwena.
Akhtuwasi guya qesh luqwena.
Akhtuwasigu ya tlat luqwena. Qaya tuj luqwena.
Akhtuwasi gusu luqwena.
Qawe dlet luqwena. Jimmy we kina at qaltut akhtul qintu.
Hakuk susi tasa qaltu.
Chatlagu qan luqwena ayatu yadu. Yike qat tlat luqwena ayatu yadu.
Qesh luqwena.
Jaade ye khatna o. De agawu aya qaya de yutuskide. Ye qasatin chayuk.
Tsutsayi kahtu satin.
Dlet luqwena. Su luqwena. Tuj luqwena.
Kum luqwena.
Saqwat luqwena.
Sikuzi. Yewa Sikuzi. Okay, so yeah. Somebody asked, is the corresponding video in the Dropbox link? I think it is. Can anyone answer that?
It's
Okay.
all there.
Okay. So
Audio,
if-
video, and Word documents.
okay, I stopped with number 9 and I did, is number 10 in there? Okay, so number 10 wasn't finished, so it might be missing a transcription. I was trying to put that one in an EAF so I could put the Tlingit writing and the English writing running along the bottom. So so it's more limited in what's in there. Okay, questions, anyone?
Got a question for you.
Good. Dasa.
When they're speaking in the video and they were giving off the different colors, I'm guessing specifically they were referring to the handkerchief, being that back in the day people were blowing their nose on those instead of like a tissue we use today. Is that what was going on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Slo, guena.
Uh,
Guena is a cloth that you use to wipe.
uh-huh.
Da, guena is a body towel. Jin Guena is a hand towel. Slu Guena is a Kleenex.
I was thinking that. It just like that must have been a handkerchief. I was thinking my grandfather used to always have one tucked in his back pocket.
They did. My gosh, think about it. That was like more than 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I just dated myself. Oh well. Yeah. Cook Suguena. That's one way to say it. Yeah. Cook Suguena. Yep. A nose towel of some kind.
That is a good way of saying that.
Sure. Yeah. Yewe. Yewe.
The paper one, yeah. The cook.
Yeah, sure. Add cook unless it's understood, and then it wouldn't hurt to just say Suguena. Suguena jita. Or wait, if it's a cloth, fabric like cloth, it would be Suguena jit Suguena jit which is another bag that Tlingit language has that there are more than 15 forms of the verb of a handling verb. So depending on how you're handling depending on what it is you're handling, the verb changes. So if it's a cloth like fabric, you'd say jit In fact, you could have a bunch of things on the table and you could just say jit and everybody looks at it. And if it's a Kleenex, you'll know that's the verb you use for a fabric-like object. And so there's jit sana. That is a living thing. Jit sana. It could be a sleeping baby too, I think. Anyway, it's fascinating how many ways you could, how many different objects require their own verb just to say pick it up or give it to me or put it over there. It all uses handling verbs that change for the object to relate to the object.
Would you ever, or have you ever heard any of the elderly people use things that were specifically meant for something else, but used it in a way jokingly to whatever they were applying it to?
I can, yeah. I mean, what?
Yeah.
Well, I've heard it as sarcasm.
Yeah.
I've heard it as trying to talk about something that there's trying to refer to something without actually saying it. That happens.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So my recommendation to everybody is that you will listen to the spoken language by the oldest speakers you can find as much as you can. Even if you don't know what they're saying, you're hearing the melody of the language, you're hearing the sounds in the language that aren't in English, and you're beginning to hear speech patterns. For example, how long does one elder wait to be sure that the other elder is done talking? So speech patterns it seems like our fluent speakers would avoid speaking on top of each other. You pause and then jump in if it goes just a little bit longer than a normal speech pattern, and it's your turn. A lot of times elders will say, "Yewa," that's it, when they're done talking, if they're given a long talk, and then others know that they're done talking. Yewa. Any other questions?
I had a quick question from the Unit 1 video. I was looking at line 6 where it says "Wasa yidu wasak," and for "what are you called?" Yesterday I'd written down, and I'm not sure, maybe I just spelled it wrong, but I'd written down "Wasa yidu wasak," which I put in the chat how I wrote it down. I wasn't sure, is that just how it's been written at different times, or or I was wondering if I maybe took the wrong notes. If there's like between the two.
Okay, so you're listening to two fluent speakers talking to each other in this video. They were hired to translate a set conversation. They did this with more than one language, and they had a puppet show, and then they dubbed speakers from different languages onto it. So they picked two speakers who come from a specific region. From listening to their accent, I feel like they're more northern speakers. And each region, there's central Tlingit, northern Tlingit, southern Tlingit, and then there's a blend in between. You can tell what region or what area or what community a speaker is from, or you used to be able to do that, from the way that they put their sentences together, or the way they lengthened the ending vowel or clipped the ending vowel. And so that's what I think is happening here. We have remember I said something about standardizing the writing system. So what you got yesterday was a standardization, and what you heard on the video clip is the variations that happen between communities and between regions. Means identical. It's just a shaded difference in pronunciation.
What was the different, or say it again, what was the difference?
So I wasn't paying attention. He was. He said in the video, it was wasa yidu asak. I think that's what you said. Yeah, Andrews?
Oh no, this was from a conversation from some lessons we were doing yesterday. I wasn't sure if it was a regional thing, which it seems like it is.
I would suspect that if you heard slight differences, which is great for you, it means that you're picking up on the fine tuning of the language. That's great. I mean, you've come a long way when you can catch that. Awesome. But be aware that there are regional accents. I'm not going to call them a dialect. A dialect is when a language has gone far enough apart that they're kind of hard you have to work to understand it. All of Tlingit Aayí, from the northern Yakutat area to the southern Wrangell area to the interior of Canada, is one language, but there are accent differences. If you think about English, you'll say, okay, I'm not good at this, but we have a southern accent, y'all, right? You know, and then there's a Boston accent. I have to polish up on my accents, but you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you just, what did they say? And you have to roll it around your mind, and then you realize, oh, they're saying car, not car. So English has accents from different regions, and Tlingit does too. English is still the same language. Yeah, what are y'all of you called? Exactly. But there you go. Wasayi would do a saw. So okay, so there are okay, one more tip. There are multiple ways to say the same thing. So if you think that's the only way there is to say what's your name, wasayi do a saw. Think again. There's lots of ways that you can subtly change that question. And you can do it in English too. What's your name? What are you called? What do they call you? How are you known? What will I call you? I mean, there's lots of ways to ask in English, what's your name? And the same thing in Tlingit. So be aware that if you think you learned a phrase that is good for everything in every situation, keep your mind open, because there's shades of connotation in the way a sentence is given. So like the question word ge. You can turn a statement into a question. So if I said, wasa iati, and you, oh no, that the answer would be, maybe, it might be, wasa Well, what if I asked you, Tlingit ge I ute? Same answer. Tlingit ge ute. I put a get in there. When you have a get in a sentence, it turns the whole statement into a question. There are 3 or 4 other question words, but the get is the most common. If you you could also say Tlingit I ute ge. Well, you're just moving the get. On the surface of it, you're asking the same question. But where you put the get changes the connotation of the question. You can do that in English, but you have to do it with inflection, voice inflection. Are you fine? Are you fine? So, Tlingit ge I ute. Are you fine? But if you said Tlingit ge, no, Tlingit I ute ge, that's are you fine? There's a shade of change of meaning, implying that that other person was not fine, but are you fine? By the way, did you all notice that that's a negative answer? I asked, Wasa iati, how are you? And you answered in the negative. Anybody notice that? Klech is the negative not. Wasa is how or what. I ute, the negative form of the verb to be. And it's been translated also as I'm no different. In English, I'm the same. In Tlingit, I'm not different. So be aware that when they translate it in English one way, that might not be the full translation of the implication and the way you use the language in Tlingit. Has anybody noticed anything like that happening? Give example. Anybody got an example? Something that stumped you? Why do they say it that way?
Well, it's not something that stumped me, but I was wondering in the first video we watched where they said Koolyéik Untitled is like the yade, like, doesn't that mean like over, like farther away?
No. Koolyéik Untitled. If I remember right, that means, how did we translate it in the document?
It says look at the people, but
Yeah.
might be confused, but
So geet is a form of gain. Geet is a okay, Jade-Woo, you're so good at this grammar. Look it up on the grammar. Geet comes from the word atishqain. Look at it. Koolyéik anisqit. Look at the people. Can you explain that, Jade-Woo? You're so good at this.
I'm not sure about the verb. Anis gate is.
Okay, so they said gate, but I think it's the verb gain.
Gain.
It's one of those
Sure.
irregular, it's an irregular verb.
Sure.
Would it be yade, like at their faces, like yada khwashkin?
Yeah, that sounds right. To their faces, look at the people. So apparently Jimmy didn't notice that was people watching him. So she was telling him, oh, look at the people's faces. Koolyéik anisqain. I think that's what she said. I'm gonna open my paper back up. Line 6. No, it's not 6. Let me know if you discover anything. Go ahead and jump in on the audio. Oh, Yadu Chane. Woohoo! Oh, Sinech. He saved me.
Sheesh.
I did have a quick question though. Why is Susie a young woman, but Jimmy's a boy when I would say the puppets are the same age?
You'd be surprised. So that young woman is not a young woman. They're close to the same age.
So I guess I'm a little confused why in the translation Jimmy is named boy, like I am a boy, and but Susie's like I am a young woman. And for me, I would
she
say those
said
two
shot. She said shot.
Oh yeah, yeah. So like life phases are really fun in Tlingit. So you have Tokanei, which is just a baby, and then as soon as they could start kind of moving around, then they go Atkatsku, but then it starts to actually gender. So then you have Shatkiatsku and Yadakwatsku, and then that's the sort of then they're that until they hit sort of basically puberty, and then you go into Yadak and Shatk, and then when they're old enough to potentially kind of get shacked up or married or whatever, then you go into Yeast Shawat and Yeast Ha, and then when they're sort of just full on grown, then you go into Shawat and Ka, and then when they get older, there's several terms that I have heard. The ones that'll get you in trouble we'll do last, but the ones that I think work well are Yanwat, which is sort of like fully grown. And then Atwisku, I've heard, which is a knowledgeable one. And then Hashukakawu, but that I've heard that in Teslan, and that's the ones who are in front of us. And then you could say Shawat Shan and Ka Shan, which is old woman and old man. But be careful with those because it's a lot like in English. So, if you say, hey, old lady, that could, or hey, old man, like that. In teasing, it can work pretty well. I was working with an elder and his wife's sister came over and we were working and he said, what's away, Shawat Shan? She says, what's that mean? I said, what's up, old lady? And I didn't even think, I just translated it, and then she kind of gave me the death stare. And I said, well, I was just a translator. And so be cautious. But, there are respectful terms, yanwat or yanwat. Sorry, I just jumped in. Good question. Okay. Yak, hey, goodness cheese, Johan. And goodness cheese to those who covered. I spent some time with some podcasters I think are really great. So developing this idea. So I'm going to interview people. If everything works out well, I'm going to interview folks who are successful in language revitalization, like the Hawaiians and the Mohawk, and there's lots of others. Ojibwe is doing amazing things. I know we were talking about Hebrew, and just finding my dog's got a squeaky toy. Finding folks, and then just sort of coming up with a structure to talk to them about like what works, what were your challenges, how do you get people to talk? Just a whole bunch of stuff like that. So yeah, I'll share more as it goes along. It's probably months away from anything, but it's a really neat program, and I heart me, yes. So I'm gonna take this toy home.
Well, Renee is doing that. I actually shared a resource in the chat based off of Koolyéik's recommendation that we listen to older speakers. If you didn't know, SHI just digitized earlier this year, 1982's celebration. If you go to most of the smaller communities, of course, it starts with a speech. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, okay. Goodness cheese. Any other questions or anything? I have an idea of what we'll do for the second half here. We're going to look at another old text. It's called Haa Atx. And then what I'd like to do is have a couple of readers volunteer to be person one and person two, and then read it and then translate it for us. So here's a chance to practice both your reading and translating skills. If you feel like you can't translate it, maybe just skip it. Some of them, they're really good sentences. It's really good texts. A W in front of non-vowels. Oh, okay. So sometimes, like in a verb, so sometimes you'll see, yeah. So the W. So there's this thing we usually kind of write it like. Where's my? Oh, I can't. Hold on. I gotta paste it in there maybe. Some character combinations for writing in Tlingit are actually shortcut keys. And my hand is up? Is that what's going on? Okay. So apparently I've been raising my own hand. Okay. How do I lower? I want to lower my own hand. Okay. I'll just stand here with my hand up until I figure it out. Lower hand. Okay. So this y thing, it's what we call a perfective marker. So in Tlingit, in the prefix of the verb, there's a spot where all the conjugation happens, and you have these three little things, and you can have these combinations, and that's how you start moving the verb from kind of now to previous to future. Although it doesn't, Tlingit doesn't really conjugate its verbs for time, right? It's more concerned about whether or not things have happened. So when that thing pops up, it's most commonly a W, right? Like w, woo-goot, right? However, so you could have something like, let me put that in the chat, woo-goot, they walked, right? That's what that is saying, woo-goot. And so if you put a vowel in front of it, so like they know it, you'd have ausaku. So a couple things with this W. One is you're gonna get, if you tend to get what we call like three or more things. So the stem for these are goot and ku. Oops, I did that second one wrong. So you start to learn how to spot the stem of the verb. Goot, ku. If you go to the, what we say is like the left, like what's before the stem, and if you get three things or more, something's usually going to start contracting. And there's these sort of rules of how things contract. So this w, very often that u will just get knocked out of there. So with ausaku, that's what happens. And so if you end up with vowel, that W, that one right there, and then a consonant, S or a D or an L or an SH, for speakers from Teslin and Carcross, that's where it converts to an M. So if you're from there, you would say siku, right? And there's a pattern there. Vowel, W, consonant, turn it upside down. But what will happen is sometimes in the vowel, right? In the verb, you'll have w, but then there'll be something in front of it that will cause that W. So you might say wuddaqeen, right? So wuddaqeen would be they flew, right? So like a bird or someone in a plane, right? And so there's sometimes, like you might say a sentence, yeah. So this sentence, yeah, it's good how it flew, like a bird or whatever. But what happens is sometimes there's a vowel that comes up before the verb, which will trigger that contraction, right? So that U will fall out. So the way you pronounce that W is, it's not like this is its own word. It just smashes into the one before it. So you get adeodeqeen. So you end up hearing like deo. And so these are some things that happen Word separation gets really tricky, like when you say things like ya nagut. Ya is technically its own word, but it just sounds like one thing. Or some people will say Y-A-N and then a new word, a gut, right? Just sort of in terms of like standardizing how we write it and why. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why. That ya thing, it pops up, it's its own thing. But it gets tricky because a vowel before a verb will very often trigger that contraction. Good question. Anybody else got any questions, things you've been thinking about? Question teeth.
Yeah, I had a question. It was like, where was it? Let me pull it up. When they said like, is that right, children? Ayach akwe at yatchi. How come the word for is that just a plural form of child, or does it change because they're directly speaking to the children?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, well, one, so when we go into like nouns, right? So there's kind of generally two main types of nouns in Tlingit. And there's ones that need to belong to another noun, and there's ones that just sit on their own, right? So you can have something like kuhida and gucha, and if this was a necklace, it would be sate. And you could just say them. They don't need to belong to another noun. When they do belong to a noun, they gain a possessive suffix. So kuhida would become ach kuhidayi. Gucha becomes ach guchayi. Sate becomes ach seidi. So there's a pattern, right? There's a whole pattern to it. We could teach you the pattern. It's very predictable. Basically, you add a vowel is where you start. But then there are things that we call inalienable, is what we could call them, but they belong to. We call them relational. They need to have another noun to belong to. And some of these, like a body part, it doesn't get that possessive suffix. Same with a kinship term, right? So you ach tla, ach ish. The one kinship term that does gain a possessive suffix is child. So the unpossessed form is yet, but you never hear it that way. People don't just say yet. A child needs to belong to something, right? And maybe there's something philosophical there. But so, when you say, then you got to put some sort of noun in there. Ach, yadi, my one child. So there's that, you hear that vowel pop up on there. It follows all these rules of possession, which we'll look at before the end of these next 2 weeks, week and a half or so. So, ach yadi, ha yadi, our child, ye yadi, y'all's child. So you could put a possessive pronoun right in front of it. If you have plurals, then this one also adapts the plural suffix, which is. So that's how you pluralize things, is with that sound. So you have Kate, dog, dogs, douche, cat, douche, cats, right? Tlingit does not always need to pluralize. Like in English, you have to pluralize it. Like you say, one cat, two cats, right? You can't say, hey, look at those three cat, right? But in Tlingit, you can. You don't have to pluralize it. You only do it when you need to really show people that there's more than one. But children is one that we will pluralize it. So ach yetki, yi yetki, ha yetki. And so that becomes the pattern there. But child and children also have this really interesting pattern as well. To just say children, you say ut yetki. And so in some communities, it contracts, it becomes adutki. But it's the same thing, ut yetki and adutki. Literally, it means something's children. But that's just how we say children. And a single child is ut kutsku. So it's just got these sort of interesting, you can go ahead and write a thesis about why, but it's really interesting to think about, but it does follow a whole bunch of these patterns. Oh, yes, thank you. Ganeshish. Someone pointed out, I usually, and I started to, but then I didn't finish. But usually when I'm showing something, I'll just open up a slideshow and I'll put the text on there, or open up a document. So I will get back into that pattern because the text is pretty small in the chat. Like sometimes I really got to stop and stare. But sometimes with this ut, this word ut, maybe I'll put together something so we could take a look at it. On its own, it means something. It doesn't mean some unknown thing. It doesn't mean some mysterious thing. It's just saying something. But it pops up all over the place. At'u, something that is paid for. That's sacred clan possessions. Could be names, stories, houses, hats, regalia. And so with the child one, that's just really interesting. But that's just how it works, is atyetki and atkatsku. And that's one to just keep in mind, because when you start talking about there were children there, or there was a child, it's one of those ones that you kind of just got to commit to memory. It's got a few different patterns and other things do. Sheesh. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So let me find this.
Oh wait, I'm putting this in the chat. I was trying to figure out how to write like this is my book. So it's not letting me type the underlines in the chat, but I try to write it as like spelled that wrong. I'm sorry. 1 second. It's right here.
Healer's got something he's putting up on the screen.
Okay. Let me pin yours. Okay, good. Okay, yes. And so here's a couple things that we're gonna do. And so maybe we'll do it, we could maybe do it tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow we will go into the lesson of how to add the possessive suffix. But for now, so here's ach, and let's just go sort of word by word. My. So then you have book. So this is a book or paper. We'll just say it's a book for now. And then we have aayí. Whoops, hold on. For this is, right? So then we have, we'll change the word order for English, right? Because, oops, that's already there. Okay, ach, kuch, aayí. So when there's a high tone on either side of aayí, and because this is a noun that can just exist on its own, once this becomes possessed, it gains a suffix. And the suffix it's going to gain is the letter U. Ach, kuchu, aayí. This is my book. Ach, kuchu, aayí. Ach, Kately. She found another squeaky toy. It's squeaky. I've been in meetings all day, so she's like, I am here. But so with Tlingit, there's these patterns, right? There's always a pattern. And so what we will do is we will look at this pattern tomorrow, and I'll show you some examples. And Tlingit patterns are pretty wild, because sometimes you'll be looking at stuff, you're like, okay, here's the rules. There's 6 rules. And it's this, then this, then this, then this, then this, then this. But when you sort of explain them all, I think it doesn't make sense. But then once you start looking at examples, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's that way because of this. And so you start to be able to make really good, accurate predictions on what that marker is going to be. Okay, great. Let's cheesh. Okay, so yesterday we were talking a little bit about working on fish. So it made me think of this text. Nay Brown was helping with this one. And so basically we're taking some of these older texts which were designed to teach Tlingit, which were made by master teachers and speakers, and we're just updating the orthography a little bit. We just write the language different now than we did in the 1970s. These are wonderful phrases. And so what I'd like to do is, one is acknowledge the folks who made this. So Vesta Dominics, who was working at a Shitka, and then Esther Shea, who was working at a Kitchkhan. And this is the National Bilingual Materials Development Center at the University of Alaska. This one was, their office was in Anchorage. And there was a whole bunch of things. And Marcia Shields is also on there for a Tlingit resource person, and Diane Crown as the illustrator. So Haa Atx da ye jene. So I'll tell you something. If we just said food on its own, it's atcha. Atcha. That is the word for food. But once you put a noun in front of it to say this is owned, it does go through some changes. Atchayi. We'll look at that tomorrow. You will learn the rules, but that's why here you have Haa Atx. Ha is our, so we collectively own it. Haa Atx. Da is around or about. Ye jene is the noun form of it. So you can make nouns out of verbs. It's a little complicated, but ye jene is a verb and it's also a noun. So in this case, it's the noun form. So it's working on our food. Okay. That's the name of this text. So here's the first one, and you'll see there are, it's not, if it starts on the left-hand side, that's person 1 or A. If it's on the right-hand side, that's person 2 or B. So what I would like is a couple of volunteer readers to just read through, and someone would read this one, then here's the response, then here's the next question, here's the response, here's the next question, here's the response. So what I would like is for 2 people to volunteer to be reader 1 or reader 2, and then to just read it in Tlingit. Then after we're done, we'll go line by line and see if we could translate it. And if you have any thoughts or questions about these particular phrases, shout them out. Okay, who wants to read?
Patea.
Chish. And Kook.
Usu John.
Wukuk. Excuse me, Wukuk.
Udesa Wukuk.
Tlinde Wukuk.
Datkasa Shinde Wukuk.
Clock Oscar Awe Wukuk.
Chish. Okay, so person A.
Where's John?
Where is John, right? So Gusu John. So you could have any name in there and you're saying, where is that person? Okay. Person B, Wukuk.
Wukuk. I think of like Yanakuk.
Yeah.
Like they, okay. So is he coming?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Tlingit loves categories, right? If you love, like, if you're like one of your type of person who's like, okay, the forks go here and the spoons go here and the spatulas go here and the tongs go here, Tlingit is wonderful for you. It loves categories. And so there are 5 types of verbs, and we'll look at this stuff again, Okay. There's an action verb for someone to do something, usually to someone. An event verb for something to happen. A motion verb for something to move. A state verb for something to be a certain way. And a position verb for something to be located somewhere. Motion verbs are pretty tricky. They have a whole set of things that make them unique. And one of them is there's usually something before it that tells you what type of motion. Okay, oh, okay. And so it was a cookie question. So usually there's something like you'd say de went towards it, dach went away from it. So usually there's something right before the motion that tells you where is it going? Is it going to it, from it, through it, over it, those types of things. But if you have nothing, then you just have the motion. So the kuch verb root is going by boat or by car, because in Tlingit, a road is a river and a car is a boat. So remember that. You're gonna yik into the boat, you yik into the car, the boat yiks into the river, and the car yiks in the road. Now it makes sense later as well. So if you only have this wukuch, I would translate that as he went boating. But it could be driving as well, right? And those are really tricky things, right? And so in this case, it doesn't really specify, right? He could have been, but in this case, I could see a picture of a boat, kind of. Okay. Next line.
Where did he head towards by boat?
Yeah. Where did he head towards? So here you have gusu. Where is it? Gudesa. Where did it go? Right? And not it, but just whatever we're talking about, right? So here's that wukuch again. Where did they go by boat or car?
Lane day wuku. Kashwasaku lane day.
Yes.
Because if I can make guesses, it's like a big road or a big way. He went up the big path, maybe. Those are guesses, man. I could be completely wrong.
What is Schlein? Anybody help us out? Schlein.
Tide flat. Tide flat. Yeah.
Tide flats, right? So, but it's
okay.
pretty unusual to say Schlein day, but Schlein day went to the low tide, went to the tide flats, right? So in that case, now we're pretty sure it's a boat, but some people drive their cars down. I don't recommend it, especially if you got sandy beaches. That car might just get stuck out there. Okay. Next line.
For what did he head out to the tidal flats for?
Yep. So we have a question here. Sa. Going after what? So especially going to the store, going like, what they go there for? And so this is like going after something, like ka. So some of these questions too, like when you're lining up some of these direction questions, where? And there's a couple different ways to answer this. Usually you get something with yadu, neshu, shkunu. But what you'll see is you're matching the suffix towards where did he go? Low tide or tide flats towards went. And then you have qa right here, going after what? And then you're going to get the qa response right there. So again, going for what tide flats towards they went by boat. So then you sort of put that into English. What do they go to the tide flats for? What they go after, right? And the final phrase.
Shlak aska awe cook.
It's a seaweed.
Yeah, shakask went for black seaweed. Right? So
My bad. I thought you wanted me to read it again.
oh no, no worries. No, we were translating at this point, but nope. It's all good. It's all good. Sheesh, any thoughts or questions about this one?
Super
I
helpful
never picked
activity.
What's that?
I was just saying it's super helpful, like breaking it down like this.
Yeah, and then that shakask, now you could put any noun there, right? God went for clams. Went for cockles. Went for octopus. And then that could also, that doesn't have to be a chain. What they go to the store for. Hey, and then so a lot of the stuff as you're at the sort of beginning, if you're at the beginning phase of Tlingit, a lot of it is like all these fill in the blank phrases. Where's the blank? The blank day wukuch. Because you could also have that be a place. Shkakwe day wukuch. Went to Skagway. Angoon day wukuch. Went to Angoon. Okay.
I have a question about the very first line. Gusu John. Just because I had written down Gusu Wehlur, which I put in the chat. I spelled the last vowel differently, and I didn't know if that's because it's used in a different sentence or because the spelling changes.
It's a good question. So I usually spell my ending vowels short, but I guess there's been some talk about spelling gusu with a long ending. I hear people say gusu, so I hear it short, but I'm on the fence now because there's people reviewing my work and they're saying this needs to be long. I'm like, all right. So that's one where and there's a whole bunch of vowel endings, not all of them, but especially suffixes. And this is a suffix. It could be long or short, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Same with, you could say ya, yak, this canoe, or you say ya, yak. It doesn't change the meaning. So there are some where there's some flexibility, right? And same with this, you could say good day sa. You say good day sa. It does not change the meaning. Cool.
Apologies if I misheard, but this is not the new writing system that we're using on this one, is it?
It is.
It is, okay.
Brand new. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's yeah, it's the one that we're using these days. So, but this is it's one of those things. I'm kind of on the fence with Gusu. I'm probably gonna, and if you work with me, there will be situations like you should write that long, and then like a year later, I was like, you should write that short. So this is gonna be
okay.
No, but it does not affect the meaning. That's not the case every time, but it is the case with vowel ending suffixes.
This is maybe more of a, not about the questions here, but what I was wondering, do we translate English names anymore into like Tlingitize? You know how people Anglize words? Do we Tlingitize words anymore, like how the scripts did for Susie and Jimmy? Just kind of curious.
It does happen, and then there's quite a few that we've inherited, like gweeches. Anybody know what gweeches are?
Bleachers.
They grow on trees.
Peaches?
That's right. So peaches. So that's one. And there's we'll call it Shingish. Sometimes the old people used to do it all the time. So Shakshani, Marge Detson, she shared with me a story, her grandma. So she and her mom, she was pretty young, were going to the store. And she was like 90 years old when she told me this story too. And so her grandma said, Kakan gwyn zach tu asagui hundaka hitidach. And this that's the way I call cock and greens. Cock and greens, you do a sago. And she started getting kind of upset. So I said, kakakwashi. Yeah, we'll go look for it. And so they left and they're looking all over the store. And they asked the storekeeper, you have cock and greens? And he's like, what? And so they came home and they're like, we don't know what it is. We didn't find it. So they brought grandma to the store next time and she pointed at a can of pork and beans. And she was like, cock and greens, cock and greens. So, and part of this is the transition that the old people made to learning English and having certain sounds that they didn't know how to make. And it's fun. We don't laugh at them or poke fun at them, but we use it sometimes as inspiration to say, okay, well, we can go the other way too. We can have that hard journey to learning these other sounds. But it does happen sometimes, and there are some speakers. So like, we'll just have to keep coming up with new words for things, right? Like is a bookworm, right? And so that's just kind of, sometimes it's fun, right? So that is inspired by punipuke, which is the Hawaiian word for nerd, which is a bookworm. So we just sort of adopted that into Tlingit. And then, yeah, the word for stamp and the word for, sometimes you end up with 3-4 words for the same thing. Jarred fish, we didn't have, nobody knew, nobody had heard of a word for it. So we work with quite a few elders, and some of them, they're like, oh yeah, that's what my mom used to say. And they'll have words for like the Canadian border and stuff like that, which I wrote down and I forgot where I put it. I'll find it. And, but some of them, they don't like to make new words. They'll say, they'll just do Tlingish, right? And so there's a whole bunch of stuff. And so I don't know if there's a word for plankton. I'll look around. Oh, and then I'll put bookworm into the big letters, so because people might want to know it.
Keshi Dutla, her name was Liz, but everybody called her Auntie Bobby. Anyway, if she was waiting for her ride, like the word for my ride, she'd say achlaidi.
Achlaidi. And we learned that one in Tessin as we're trying to say, like, what do you say when you're like, you see someone walking, you want to say, hey, you want to ride? And so they just said, light gate to Asaku. That's what they taught us there. And so we just rolled with it. And so there are some things, and then some of those concepts, it's just fun stuff. Yeah, smata for sweater. And for some of these, there's going to be different words and different communities for it. And then sometimes we'll try and do a little bit of work to sort of say, okay, let's come up with one word. And then there's some times where we're like, I went to like charge my phone and we're all working on language stuff. And I was like, what the heck do you call an electrical outlet? So then we had some real long, like, kashuk atute katitsaki, or something like that, like a electric thing that people poke into. But then we're like, that's just too long. And so then we said, kashuk, the electric mouth. And then it just sort of stuck. So coming up with new words is pretty fun. Once you sort of learn how the compounding generally works, it does make things easier. So here you have book, oops, right there, book, inside, worm. Okay, good, that's cheesh.
So, sorry, question.
Go ahead.
So, worm book inside worm rather than worm inside book.
Yeah, so because if you had worm, and so the way Tlingit goes in the opposite word order.
Okay.
So like in English, you'd say on the table, but Tlingit will say table on.
Okay.
So post positions instead of prepositions, so pre and post. And so it's just to help with your Tlingit grammar, you can just start saying them in English, you know. So like, hey, have you seen my keys? Yeah, table on.
Okay.
Like, what? People get it, but that'll help your Tlingit brain start to get ready.
Okay.
Right, and so yeah, that's the Tlingit word order. So if you applied the English and you said it sounds like a membrane that's inside of the worm, or a piece of paper or a note, you know, which you
Yeah.
could, you know, a bottle. Tuchanate could be a message in a bottle. So
Okay, great. Thank you.
good question, yeah. Yeah, and so preposition, postposition, and suffix. Okay, oops. 2 readers. For whoever's reader number 2, you have 2 lines in a row. Can I get 2 readers, please?
I'll go.
I'll go.
Sheesh.
Gusu and
Ugu.
Adu in Sabuat.
Dutla inuat. Gat has akakwaha.
Good, that's sheesh. Echa. Okay, translation for the first line. And we can open it up to anybody. If anybody wants to provide a translation, go for it. Oh.
Where is Anne?
Where is Anne, right? So pattern recognition, right? What about the next line?
She's gone out.
Yeah, she's walking, right? She's walking. And so again, you could put some things in there. You could say where they went, right? And you could also say where they are. We'll see some examples of that, answering with the same suffix. But then we get a kind of a different question after that. Who can translate this one for us? Or interpret, if you prefer that word.
Who went with her?
Who went with her, right? So here's another patterns, right? So a do sa is a who question. And with a whole bunch of these questions, right, you're usually going to have the first one, which marks what type of question, and then sa, which is technically a command form of a verb for name it. Sometimes you can have something right in between. In is with. Adu in sa. With who, and then it goes from wugut to wuat. And somebody tell me why. Why the verb change?
Plural.
Plural, right? So one person went wugut, more than one has to switch to wuat. That is something most motion verbs will do. Is that the verb will change somehow if it's plural. That's just something Tlingit likes to do as well. So who did they go with?
She's gone out with her aunt.
Not her aunt, but the rest was absolutely correct.
Is it mom?
Yes. So she walked with her mom, right? And so again, word order thing, there, a single they, there's no gender in that, but you could say his or her, however you want to switch it once you get into English, it's up to you. And so her mother with they walked, right? They plural walked. But then we just switch it over to English. And so there's a bunch, as we do these little translations, right? It shows us a lot about the word order of Tlingit. And the word order is different in Tlingit than in English. And that's okay. And oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that I think some people might say dutla for their mom's sister also.
That is correct. And so usually, long time ago, your mother's biological sisters, because they're all the clan, like let's say she's Kagwantan. All those Kagwantan women who are her age would all, those would all be her sisters, the older sisters, the younger sisters, right? So the sibling terms just extend across the clan. There's no cousins or anything like that, right? And so, but her biological siblings, same parents, the kids would often call them as well, Achtla. And then there was also, it was very common, like, okay, let's say there's a mother and she's got kids and then she has a sister. If unfortunately something happens to her, she's gone, that sister will step in and just become the mother. But yeah, it was very common for them to use tla for their aunties. Okay, last line. Who wants to translate that?
They're getting clams.
Yes. So clams, has a kakwaha, they are going to dig them up. So this is a future. So the future verbs, they get a little bit long, but you see this kakwa. That's the future for they are going to. Okay. There's another way that it could appear depending on the classifier, but for now, that's a future. Kakwa. There's a few of these future, you start to recognize these things. Woo, it already happened. Kakwa, it's gonna happen. Okay, so they're gonna dig up clams. Any thoughts or questions on that?
Sure. On that kakwaha, what's that in the beginning of it instead of saying like gathas kakwaha?
Good question. So in Tlingit, some verbs have an object, some of them don't. Does it happen to something? Because you could just go digging. I'm just gonna go digging, right? Like a dog might be just digging in the yard, right? But if you're digging something up or planting it, perhaps, then you're going to have an object in there. And a lot of times the third person object, and for some things like eat it, that's always going to be a third person unmarked object. There's all kinds of stories, like a monster is like, I'm going to eat you all up. That's how you'd say that. I don't know why you'd say it, but if you're talking your potatoes or something, I don't know. But the third person is usually unmarked. What that means is there's no pronoun there, right? But when you have a third person subject, which is also unmarked, and a third person object, that object must be the letter A. And that's why you say ausaku or saku. They know it. There has to be an it there. So in this case, and what's interesting in Tlingit is it stays, right? So in English, you say they're going to dig it up. But the it would go away if you say they're going to dig up some clams. Now there's no it anymore. But in Tlingit, that it must stay there. Same with if you specify the people, right? Like, oh yeah, they know him. They know Sam. In Tlingit, the him would still stay there, or the them. Okay. Okay. Cheese. Maybe one more, maybe two. This might be the only thing we do today. But I love these little books, are so fun. Okay, I need 2 readers. We ain't got time to wait. Be brave.
I can do a voice.
Oosh. And person number 2.
I'll try.
Okay. Okay. Gook.
Usu Margaret.
Du hoch in uat.
Gudesahasuat.
Ash un hasuat.
Dasa has ashun.
Ga.
Goodness, cheese. Okay. And oh, I saw a question in the chat. I will put this on our class page tonight. So you just go to tlingitlanguage.com, learning Tlingit, then a little submenu pops up. You go to Tlingit MOOC, and you scroll down and you can watch the class again, share it with friends, and then all the handouts are there as well. So I'll make sure that this is up there. As well as our class notes, so people can get the bookworm. Okay. Translation. First line.
Gusu, Margaret. Where is Margaret?
Where is Margaret? Second line.
Duhuch in Wuatz. She is with her husband.
That's right. So the du is singular they, there. Chuch is a husband. That is another gendered kinship term. A lot of them are not gendered. Some of them are. In, there's that with again. Wuat, there's walking again. Right? And so there's no direction there. So they're just walking. She's walking with her husband.
Good
Next
day.
line.
Good day, say Hasvuat. Where are they walking to?
Where did they go? So the wuat signals that it's already happened, right? So, because you could say good day sa yasna at. Where are they going right now, right? So that you can sort of shift it around, but the wuat is where did they go?
Where did they go?
Athlun Hasvuat. They're going hunting.
They went hunting. They went hunting. So again, the wuat shifts us into the went kind of a mode. Athlun is hunting. If for some folks in the interior, they might have another, they might say, what is it, a skeet day? Is that how it goes? Isakoksha?
I say hasvugut.
A skeet haswugut. So you might say that as well. But in this case, achlun is, it's a verb, but in this case, it's a noun. Achlun hasvuat. They went hunting. Next line.
Dasa has as Achlun. Dasa has Achlun. What did they hunt?
What? Yeah. Or what? And so there's a bit of a shift here too, because now there's no W in there. So it's happening right now. What are they hunting? Right? What are they hunting? And Tlingit, it's really interesting the way that time shifts sometimes. But so dasa is a what question. So whenever you have like what verb, dasa icha, what are you eating? Dasa ichuk, what are you sipping? Dasa idina, what are you drinking? Dasa iqik, what are you throwing? Or what did you throw? So in this case, dasa hasachun, what are they hunting? They're hunting.
I think ducks.
Yes, they're hunting ducks. Gah, right? So, yuck. A. Any thoughts or questions on this one? Oh, yes, and good point. So since we're talking about hunting here, this would be fine to say because you're talking about what they're doing. But let's say we're two friends, and I want to say, hey, let's go hunting tomorrow. So what I should not say, if we go old school Tlingit, even though it's grammatically correct, because once I say that, all those Koolyéik out there be like, say what? We're out. We're gone. And I think there's also some humility thing there, like we're gonna go get it. So sometimes you might say something like a shady, wait. Wait, she the a to she seqanan. Ja'at to art. We're gonna go look for the thing with horns tomorrow. Let's go walk around. So you gotta speak in these codes, right? That's how you used to do things. And so sometimes you'd have these alternative words for hunting and stuff too. And then sometimes you would say the animal who hasbu'at, and the who part is among. So you can say gach who hasbu'at. They went among the ducks. Tsege dichu hasbu'at. They went. The way you would usually interpret that is they're trapping beaver. They're hunting ducks. Because sometimes too, if they're in the act of doing it now, you wouldn't talk about it as it's just like Tlingit logic. But then there's some of those who, like we're in the language nest, and some kid was throwing a fit, and yeah, sometimes when kids get mad, they'll just go stand by themselves. And one of the elders said, "Ha, or no, he doesn't want to go be among the people." And so sometimes when you say who, it could mean other things too. For example, you might say Gusu. I don't want to put anybody's name in here. Gusu, whoever. Kushtachu good. They went among the land otters, and that's a uh-oh thing because now they kind of probably been taken. But for a lot of the things, so there's a lot of different ways to talk about some of these things. And some of it, like here's the grammar thing, here's how you say it. But then sometimes there's these cultural things as well, which really informs the way that we talk about a lot of different things. Good points, good questions, good stuff. Any other thoughts? I don't think we have.
Question just about the wu'at in this example. In the previous one we talked about, or we'd mentioned when translating that it meant they walked. Is it still like specific to them walking here? Like if you went hunting for ducks, would like wu'at not be as applicable? Like I guess, does the categorization get that defined?
Yeah, well, so like with the wu'at, so it means to go, right? So there's some different things. We say ashlun haswu'at, they went hunting. But you could also say, you could say something like this. Hutsnu de haswu kuch ashlun, right? Or you could say hasan qatlunit, so that they could go hunting. Right, so there are ways you can sort of, it depends if you need to specify a place, but then there are sometimes where you're just putting a noun, especially like working, hunting, fishing, dancing, any of those things, and you don't need the day part to go towards, because you say "Atlech wugut," they went dancing. "Atlun wugut," they went hunting. So yeah, sometimes it gets really specific, but other times it just depends on what the focus is. So here the focus is on they went to go do this thing. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. And one more, if that's right. The has in all these sentences. Like I understand that dasa is the what part. The achun is hunting. What's the has doing?
So for a lot of the pronouns, there's a singular and a plural version. So cha is I'm doing it. Tu is we are doing it. I is you are doing it. Ye is y'all are doing it. And same thing with the objects, right? So you got chet, ha, and then you got I and ye. But for the third person, it's usually unmarked. So what you end up with is you put has in front of the verb to say plural third person. So that's how and so it's a little bit unusual because it also technically can pluralize either the subject. For example, you say has ausetin. You could translate as they plural, saw them singular. That could also be they singular, saw them plural, or they plural, saw, them plural. So you got to do some extra work outside of the verb to specify who we're talking about. But hus means that something is being pluralized as a third person. So hus, and then you see there's no hus right there because we're talking about her, but we know that she's with, we assume anyways that she's with somebody. And so that's why the verb goes plural, but you don't, usually you always see a hus when you got like wu ot. Good questions. Okay,
she-
a couple other hands I see up. Who wants to go first? How about Kaiwu?
The third question down, dasa, is there usually a high tone over the da, over the first A on da?
No, usually
And
not.
it's not, usually not?
Yeah, that if you have high tone on da, it's usually the ermine. But yeah, it's real interesting that because you have a high tone on wa, sa, but on da, it's usually
Okay. And one more quick question. When I learned and I write the L's, I put a slanted strike through them. Is that out of fashion now to do?
we don't usually do that since there's no voice L. But some people do. I don't think there's anything in the sort of the Lear orthography or the YNLC orthography that was in use years ago. They would put the barred L in there. Other communities, I think Haida puts an H before the L, and that's how they mark the unvoiced L. Tlingit, we don't really use the barred one. But there are speakers who use a voiced L, and so we put an L with an underline, which is just it gets more complicated.
I don't underline it. I just put a slanted strike, short strike through the L. That's how I was taught.
Yeah, I think that's how they used to do that, but I think fell out on for a lot of folks working around the Juneau area quite a while ago.
That's not done. Okay. Ganeshjish.
Question about gender turns. So let's say it's Gosus Martin. He's out with his husband?
Yeah. So as we've had folks who are non-binary, or sometimes, it's a man with a husband, a woman with a wife. The de doesn't have to change, and so we'll say like dushet, and then and we know it's a female, and so as they sort of have sometimes through adoption and sometimes through other biological processes as they have kids, then sometimes we just got to work out some of the kinship terms in terms of like and we had some of these debates, and they were sometimes kind of heated debates at Tlingit and Haida if people were getting married who were the same gender. And I said, that's not a problem, but as long as they're opposite clan, if they're not opposite clan, then I don't know if the tribe should endorse it. But also, that's another practice that's sort of old. That's the way it used to be. And, that's not the way it is now. And I don't want to make anybody feel bad or ashamed or anything like that. But yeah, that's a good question. And so the term for husband and wife are gendered with shat and chuch, but the d part isn't, so it doesn't matter. Cool.
Kind of make me wonder, like if you were to say, do Shawadi person's name afterwards, so I thought the wife's, like if you were referring to someone's wife, so you don't want to call them their Shawad, their lady, then I guess that would be what you're actually saying, huh?
Well, yeah, so you can use shawati, and you can use kawu, and you can use khana. I think shawati and kawu could be just a girlfriend and a boyfriend. Shatki and yadaku is another way to say, if they're also young. So you can also sort of put the age and the relationship packaged together. But if you say khana, I remember I said Chana one time before I was married, and someone's like, "Oh, you guys got married?" I was like, "Oops, okay, maybe I'll switch back to Shawati," right? And so, and when you say like Ach Shawati or Ach Kawu, it's more about a relationship. It's not like that's my woman, I own her. So it's not really a possession thing. It's because the possessive suffix, it's a relational suffix as well. So we'll see it between two things that just have a relationship. It doesn't always imply ownership, which I think is important to know.
Enoch Shawade.
No. Yeah, well, and then I don't know how it worked. You know, there used to be sometimes multiple husbands, multiple wives. That's also a long time ago. I don't know how. There, I know there's stories where they'll say, I mean, there was like, Yisha what oh wait, shut. I can't remember. It's in the Haa Atx story if you want to go look at it.
I was a little curious about that because that there are people now who practice having multiple husbands and multiple wives, and I was asking Shirley Kendall about it, and she was like, well, there's really old words, and started talking about old ones, but she was like, I'm not sure if that could apply now for people who are non-Tlingit who engage with multiple partners.
Yeah, so for kinship, to pluralize a kinship term, you follow it usually with hus as a high tone. So like achkakas, my uncles, achishas, my fathers. So I would assume you could say achuchas, my husbands, or achshethas, my wives. I'm not judging anybody how they do things, whatever you want to do. But there are a couple of them that have yun. So achkani yun, achunki yun, achdachunki yun. And the yun seems to have a little bit more of a, sometimes we signal closeness with this at the end of things. Like you could say achdachunk. And I would usually translate that as my dear grandchild. Achsik, my dear daughter. Achyitk, my dear son. And the yun seems to do something kind of similar to that, but it's only associated with certain ones. Most of them are hus. So that'd be my theory. I'm probably not going to be the one to take that to the elders, though. But there's some of them that would probably have fun with it, you know. And it was a practice. So, okay. All right. Well, we'll end on that. So, go love who you love, have fun, and Gunchish everybody, and Gunchish for those who led the way during the first hour. That's what we put that on some t-shirts. Love is love, so enjoy it while you can. Gunchish. See you folks.
Okay. So whenever you get a chance, if you got a moment, I'd still like to see if you ever have time in your schedule. I know you were gone for a while and I didn't want to disturb you guys on your trip.
Okay. I'll shoot you a message.
All right, man. Talk to you later. Have a good one. I'm gonna cheese.
Okay, goodness, cheese. You creep in to ask for cookies and video games. They know I gotta get rid of them, so they're like, "Can we get this?" And I was like, "Yeah, just go." They're smart. Yeah,